Good evening, YouTubers. I'm making a video tonight for my my new channel, my airgun review channel, and there's such a lot to talk about, really. And there's a lot of good YouTubers out there who already do reviews on airguns and stuff. Andy's airgun reviews, I watch a lot of his stuff, but he's got a pretty good format that works. You know, he comes along and he features different airguns, and he does the walk around, he talks about it, he does it shows you how to load them up and does the feet per second, and on his chronograph goes off and does a bit of target shooting, and he's very good, but you'll never hear him putting anything down or saying, "Oh, like that's rubbish," whereas he will with me. But I'm not going to try and repeat what other people have done really well. I'm going to talk about things, different aspects of stuff, because there's three different kinds of airguns that are going to appeal to different people. There's the C02 airguns, there's the break barrel airguns, and there's the PCPs. And we'll come to the PCPs later because they're obviously the future of serious airgun shooting. Okay. So, putting target work aside for a moment, because you know, if you want to start off with air guns, the break barrels are probably the best to start off with because they're cheap. You know, you can get a really good one for a couple of $100 and start off from there, and you learn how to shoot the actual air gun and get into air gun shooting at targets, and then you start to get further and further away with your accuracy. Now, years and years ago, I told you I had a break barrel air gun, a BSA Cadet. It was one of my first. I mean, they were donkeys years old. I think they stopped making them in the 50s, 1950s. But they're a really good gun. I'd buy another one tomorrow if I came across one. They're really good, solid, well built. They'd last 100 years for sure, and I just hang it on the wall because they were brilliant. And I moved on. I got a BSA Meteor, and it came with a telescopic sight when I bought it, and I thought, oh, that's handy, and looked through it as you do, and it was a novelty, wasn't it? You look through and you think, oh, there goes the telescopic sight. It looks more like a sniper rifle, doesn't it, with a telescopic sight on. But the limited range of an air rifle, I finished up taking it off and just using the iron sights because I felt the iron sights did what I needed to do. I mean, if your eyesight's bad and you feel that you'll benefit from a telescopic sight, then by all means, you know, you can buy a really, really good telescopic sight for like the same price as the gun, you know, $200, £200, something like that. You don't really need it, honestly, you don't. Well, some people might, I feel. But for me, iron sights do really well. We used to shoot 7.62 NATO at 300 yards just using iron sights. So I could never see the need for a telescopic sight. That's just me. Maybe my eyes have changed and maybe I'll have a different opinion. So I'm going to pick up one. The wife has bought me one. It's in the post, so we'll see how we get on with that. We're gonna. In the old days, they had a barrel that broke and it just compressed the spring. Whereas today I've been looking at all different kinds of air guns. I wanted to start off with a cheapie. I didn't want to buy a Woodstock Springer barrel that I had when I was like a teenager. I thought, what else is there out there? What else can we look at? And I've ordered one with a gas piston. It doesn't have a spring yet, it's got a gas piston in there. And the barrel has been configured with a silencer. You know, it's got a built-in silencer in the barrel. So I thought they're two features that I like. You know, I've never fired one, but I'll try it. I'll see what they're like, and then we can start doing some target work, showing you how to zero the gun and then how to extend the range until you reach the limit of the gun, and so you can't, you're struggling, because you can do that with a compressed air gun. And of course the other gun is the C02. Now with air guns you can do a thing called dieseling. I'll do a separate video on dieseling. It's where you put a drop of diesel oil, or we used to use Vaseline, or Vicks Vapor Rub, you know, once you put up your nose. We used to put a bit of that in the back of the pellet and stick it in the gun and compress it, because as you know, diesel will combust when it's compressed. So the compression of the air coming through to blow the pellet down the barrel caused a little bit of an explosion, and it would accelerate the pellet out of the barrel a little bit faster than normal, which is a bit naughty. You shouldn't do it really, but it doesn't do any harm. And you finish up having to clean the barrel afterwards because it's got residue and crap in it. But it's an experiment. It's something that everybody tries, and then you think, well, it doesn't really give you that much of an advantage. Maybe a bit, and then you just don't bother after. But going back to C02, if you want to buy an air gun and it says C02 on it, forget it. You can't diesel it. Never. It's never going to happen. Doesn't matter if it's pellets or BB. CO2 rings an alarm bell for me because they're very low powered. There's a pressure valve, and you're never going to get the power levels up above where they are at the moment. They're great for 10 yards for blinking beer cans, you know, but what they really do cater for is historical guns. You know, people who are into historical guns can actually buy them and shoot them, whichever one takes your fancy, because they're all the same, but they're all different. They're like people. And because you've seen my Luger P08, I really like the P08, and I've got a Webley revolver. I'll show you that as well at some point. That takes 6 shots, and you got a bullet, but it was completely hollow when you put a BB in the end of it, and the thing blows CO2 down the middle and blows the BB out. And you go through the motions of putting all 6 bullets in the revolver and shooting it and doing all the things and firing it. It's no more powerful than anything else, and it only fires 6 shots, so you won't actually finish up firing it a lot. You fire it a bit at first, and then I've got a display case. I finished up putting it in a display case because I looked at some of these Colts on the internet in America. You got these collectors, and they've got an old Colt cap and ball navy or something like that, and in a display box. They've got a little flask, powder flask, and they've got all the little dividers. And I think they look really cool in the display box. And then you've got, even earlier than that, you've got a box with a pair of dueling pistols in, and I thought, wow, that looks really cool. I want a display box, I want something in there. And they cost a fortune, don't they? That's if you're allowed to have them in the first place. So you really can. I've got a Webley revolver in a display box. I bought it off Amazon. The box was nice, but I finished up sanding it quite a bit to make it nice and make it look old, and rub linseed oil on it and things like this. And so I'm in the process of aging it, and I've got my Webley in there with the brake barrel, and it actually looks really good in the display box. And I like to, you know, when I'm walking through the house, sort of look at the display. It's got a glass lid, and you can look in and you think, yeah, I like that. I'm going to reconfigure, get some wood, and make some sections, and I haven't decided how I want it to go yet. And that, so you know, you really can get old Colt 45s, BB guns, CO2, and you could make a nice display box, and it's all part of the collection and playing with things, isn't it? And the CO2 really does appeal to people who want to experience old classic firearms but don't have the money or the opportunity to actually go out and buy these guns. I was looking at a Krieghoff Luger tonight, P108, for $137,000. I mean, alright, it was the first one that was ever made, apparently. It's got something to do with the stamps on it, the date. You know, whereas your average Luger on his site on legacycollectibles.com, you can look on there, because I'm no way I'm ever going to buy anything off his site, but I am interested. I do like looking at his Lugers and stuff, and quite often, you know, his Lugers are thousands and thousands of dollars, real ones, 9mm and going back all kinds, and occasionally you'll get a really rare one that's like stupid money, more than my house for a Luger. But yeah, you can get Lugers, and you can get a few display boxes off Amazon for $20-$30, something like this, and you can play as a collector of just cheap stuff. You know, it amuses me, it keeps me good, and you can shoot them. There's no point in having something like a replica that's made of stuff. It doesn't fire anything. I mean, what's the point in having something like that? At least with these, you can actually. They're really good replicas. I've always wanted a broom handle Mauser or something like that in BB, you know, C02. So it does appeal to me, that side of it. Got an MP40. They want 37 grand on Legacy Collectibles for a real one, and you probably couldn't have one anyway. You know, who's allowed to have a submachine gun? Not many people. But you can buy them on Amazon for $300, and you can have it hanging on the wall or in a display case or doing whatever. Have a German helmet next to it, if that's what you like. Thompson submachine gun, anything. Uzi. When I first met Fiona, she had an Uzi. It was a deactivated Uzi from the 60s with a wooden stock, and I went, wow, that's cool. You don't meet girls with Uzis very often. I mean, it was deactivated, so it was completely legal, and it was in her house. It was on a display, and she had a Vickers heavy machine gun 303, you know, the big First World War, on a tripod, and that was in the house, pointing at the letterbox. See anyone looking through the letterbox, see this thing, and it was again deactivated. Very expensive, and probably even more expensive now. Looking back, I mean, we disappeared, as you know, and she had to sell it. But wouldn't that be great to still have hold of that? You know, that'd be so cool. So I mean, deactivated guns are something else. I had an SMLE. I think I paid about £100 for it, and I left it on the wall at my ex-girlfriend's house. I think she's still got it to this day. Deactivated again, 100% legal. Rusty old bayonet on the end with no handle. Same gun today is probably worth getting on for £1,000, you know, but you win some, you lose some, don't you? So I really like air guns, and especially BB C02 guns, because they appeal to the enthusiast who can go and play with all these different. But you have to bear in mind, you ever buy anything with CO2 on the end of it, whatever kind of gun it is that you're into, that you like, you can get modern ones. I like the Second World War sort of stuff. But whatever kind of period you're into, you can get them, you can collect them, but they're only 10-yarders. Like I said, I did shoot 16 yards the other day with the PO8, as you know, but it took quite a bit of effort to actually hit anything with it at that kind of range. So you're good for 10 yards. You can generally hit everything at 10 yards. Like plinking cans in the back garden, I mean, that's all it's good for. But then moving on to the break barrels, and we're going to talk about target shooting. And people often do so many videos on the internet. There's so many people that don't know what they're talking about. And I'm going to try and endeavour to cover all that. It's like a guy who buys a car. You know, I want to buy a car that's faster than all my mates. Yeah, okay. But if you've got the money, you can do that. But is that going to make you a better driver than all your mates, or are you going to crash first? Same with cameras, you know, if you want to be a good cameraman, you go out and buy a really expensive camera. Is that going to make you a better photographer? Because my argument is a good photographer will take really good pictures with a cheap camera. And someone who doesn't know what they're doing is going to buy a really expensive camera, and they're not going to get the results. So you start small, you start with a cheapie, a good one, a good cheapie, and then you learn the trade, if you like. It's not difficult with shooting. It's really good, and you get into it, and you get really good, and then you evolve, and that's where you start talking PCPs, because PCPs are obviously the evolution, and that's the way to go with. But they're very expensive. very expensive, and there's no point in jumping in and buying a really expensive gun and thinking it's going to make you a really good shot, because it won't. Put a big expensive scope on it, will you? That's nice. But you'll finish up selling it because you won't know what you're doing, and you'll be sick of it and you won't shoot it anymore. And then someone will buy it off you for a really good price, won't they? So my advice is to get in there, buy something sensible and move up. I couldn't afford, when I was doing competition shooting in Civvy Street in the local gun clubs, I had a Ruger Security 6 with a 6-inch barrel. It was £150. That's all I could afford it. But the guys who were really good had the Colt Python 6-inch barrel. And I had to go with the Colt Python, and I thought, wow, that is seriously good gun. But I could beat everybody as it was with the £150 Ruger Security 6. And I was beating people with the Colt Python, and I thought, well, that's because you're not really knowing what you're doing. You're not up to it, you haven't trained. And the Colt Python then, I'm going back to the mid-80s, that they were £500 each. Just didn't have the money, couldn't afford it. If I could have afforded it, I would have moved on and would have got one, and that would have given me the edge to clean up. But it only gives you the edge if you know what you're doing. And since I beat most people anyway with what I had, I mean, it was a great gun, the Ruger, don't get me wrong. I'm not knocking Rugers at all. They were a great gun, they were a budget gun, they were cheap, and they were very, very good. But they were not as good as the Colt Python. You know, the bounce, when it bounces and comes down again, the Python was heavier and smoother, and it was just a nicer gun. You could, a mate used to lend me his 4-inch Python, and I did a few competitions with the 4-inch Python, but I preferred the Ruger, to be honest. The 4-inch was good, but it was hard work to hit things. The 4-inch barrel with a 6-inch barrel was way better. So the longer your barrel, again, that's giving you a bigger advantage. The shorter the barrel, it's much harder to hit anything. So if you're talking pistols, you want a minimum of 6 inches to give you that bit of an advantage. Because if you see people that buy a snub nose revolver, and I just look at it and think, well, you're never going to hit anything with that unless you're at point blank range. You're just not going to hit anything. No way. You're going to go on a 25-yard range, you're not even going to hit the target. You won't even see where the bullet went. It's absolutely useless. And I dare say there's a few people out there that say, that's nonsense, it's nonsense, I've got a 1-inch barrel and I can hit things 100 yards away. Can you? Okay, if you say so. So we're going to talk about C02, which is in a completely different area to break barrels. Okay, and break barrels are where you want to start. If you've never fired an air gun, you want to get a good, cheap, let's say $200 break barrel, which doesn't need any expensive pump, because the minute you start going into PCPs, you start getting expensive. You've got to recharge the gun, you've got to pump it up. You mean rapid fire, your gun's going to empty really quickly and you need to recharge your cylinder, and then people finish up with a compressor in the boot of the car, which costs them $1,000, and having to buy loads of fancy equipment, and then seals start going and you need to start replacing the seal. I mean, gun's got a leak. You don't want none of that. You want to just start off with something that's cheap and it works and it's reliable and it's got a good feel to it. And I'll teach you how to shoot. I'll teach you how to zero the weapon in, okay, and I'll teach you how to hold the gun and how to shoot it. I saw Andy's air guns tonight and he was shooting some piece of rubbish for $200. I thought, for $200 a BB pistol, you could have bought a decent air rifle with that. And he was still using he was sitting down and he had a tripod rest and he was resting his arm on the tripod to shoot a BB pistol. And I thought, well, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? That's not shooting. If you want to shoot over a certain distance, then yeah, you do need a bipod on the front of the gun. I used to use the SLR and we didn't have a bipod on it. The SLR would have benefited tremendously from a bipod, but we didn't have bipods. We had the cheapest version of the SLR in the British Army to save a few quid, obviously. And when I converted to the LMG, which is the Bren gun, 7.62 Bren gun, which did have a bipod, and you never fired it sort of standing up. You always, wherever possible, prone position down, bipod, looking down the sights. It was like this with all of them down the side of the gun because the magazine's on the top. You could not miss. Up to 300 yards of iron sights, you just didn't miss. You didn't miss ever. Guys, it was that good. And you think, oh, bipod, eh? And then some of the sniper rifles had a little monopod under the butt, so you could have it resting, and then you could wind the butt up and down. So you're looking at it and you're getting it really, really steady, and then the trigger pull is, so you never yank the trigger because the whole gun moves if you do that. You always take the first pressure up and then slowly squeeze the second pressure, and you don't breathe, you know, while you're pulling that trigger, because any sort of movement will move that gun, you'll lose the shot. And it's only in long range shooting. I mean, I never fired it in a competition more than 300 yards, 300 metres. But you get lots of people who do. And if you're shooting over 300 yards, then you really need to start thinking about the wind and aiming a little bit off for the wind, and then talking about telescopic sights. I've never bothered with them, honestly. I've got a telescopic sight coming with this rifle that Fiona bought me. I think I'll stick it on eventually and have a go with it, but I can't see the advantage on a gun that can't shoot very far. I mean, how far will an air rifle shoot? This is a 177 break barrel. I mean, realistically, how far are you going to shoot? You should be able to shoot 50 yards with it. You don't need a telescopic sight to shoot something 50 yards away. Maybe it'll get to 100. Maybe. I don't know. I can't see it shooting over 100 yards. Maybe it will. I guess we'll find out, because it's been a long time since I've done any serious target shooting with an air rifle. I guess we're going to find out quite soon. Thanks for watching.